The topic of this video is going to be buffing. This is the same 12-string amber fire glow jumbo that we've been working on the last few weeks. It has been clear coated now about 3 times. You might say, oh, too thick. A poly is too thick. I love that word poly because it doesn't mean anything. It's actually polyurethane, so we could say the urethane's too thick. But in fact, in the areas that are important to the sound of the guitar, it's been sanded so many times that there's virtually no urethane on there. And I'm going to say that the average thickness of the urethane varnish on this guitar on the flat surfaces is probably somewhere in the 7/1000ths of an inch range, and as it ages it will shrink about 50% more, so we'll see 3.5 thousandths of an inch of varnish on it. Now in areas such as the heel, or in the heel joint, or the back of the heel here, you're going to have more varnish, because that's, as you watch the spray gun videos, you'll see that's where the spray guns strokes overlap, so we get a lot more varnish on there, and that allows us to sand it and make it relatively smooth. So we'll have thick varnish here, but on the areas where it counts, it's thin varnish. It's taken, oh gosh, it takes about 3 hours every time this thing is sanded. The most recent sanding took 3.5 or 4. That was to get the final coats of varnish dead flat, so that the guitar would reflect like a mirror. Now I enjoy doing matte guitars as well, but gloss finishes, as I mentioned, are what I specialize in. Okay, here's my homemade polishing wheel. It's a Stuart McDonald arbor with a couple of 12-inch wheels, one for coarse, one for fine buffing. I've covered over the motor with a diaper here, just so it doesn't get loaded up with polishing compound. I use 3 different polishing compounds on 2 wheels, because this particular polyurethane is a pretty tough subject to buff. So on the left-hand wheel we start out with this very dark brown Menzerna wax and abrasive compound. This is a coarse compound. I don't think it's the coarsest they make. It might be, but it's close to it. And I will tone that down by hitting it with this medium buffing compound, which is the one that I use the most. And then when the whole guitar or an area is buffed properly using this coarse wheel, I'll move over to the fine wheel. And the fine wheel is charged with this wax compound, which is a very, very fine abrasive in wax, and also a little bit of this medium. So I'll start out coarse, then coarse with medium, then I'll go to fine with medium, and then I'll use nothing but the fine compound on here to bring it to a mirror shine. After that, it goes back to the workbench and it's hand buffed with 2 more abrasives and then waxed. So the bottom line is it ends up with no swirl marks, no scratches, nothing but a mirror finish. And from that point on, all of the parts are mounted and we set it up and tune it. So the first thing we want to do, oh, and I also wanted to point out here, down below here is a foot pedal. That's what I use to turn the buffer on, so I don't have to be flicking a switch, have it come up to speed, and then maybe have a little bit of a problem and have to somehow let go of the guitar to turn it off. This leaves both my hands free to steady the guitar. It's a momentary contact, or a dead man's pedal, which means I'll touch it. The minute I take my foot off, the machine slows down, and if I have the buffing wheel on the object, the machine stops virtually immediately. You'll notice how slow the buffer's turning. Fast buffers burn varnish. Slow buffers like this, and this one turns at about 900 RPM, are just about right for buffing. This is a belt-driven buffer, and what that means is if I want to press down on this thing, it'll slow down to the point where it's barely turning, or it's turning at something like 200 RPM, and I can kind of get in and buff an area without worrying about the varnish burning. The reason that happens is the belt slips, and it's supposed to slip. The motor hangs on a gravity type of a hanger, so that if I need to put pressure on, it'll slow the buffing wheel down, because the belt is going to slip as the motor comes up from from the gravity lever itself, or the platform that it sits on. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to charge this wheel with some of the real coarse compound. Notice how the wheel picks up the brown color of the compound. Notice also that when I'm charging or buffing, I'm generally, almost 99% of the time, working in this area of the wheel. If I work down here, it's going to tend to grab. If I work up here, it's going to tend to grab and push it towards me. Anytime it grabs, if it catches an edge, it's going to burn the paint off the edge. So I have to be really careful in how I treat this thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the Steve Martin movie, The Jerk, but there's a scene there where he buffs a car with a buffer that's pretty hilarious. He ends up, I think, falling down or something because the buffer runs right off the car. These buffers do have a fair amount of power. Oh, I'm going to put some medium on here. Okay, it's charged. Now, this is an old wheel, so it doesn't throw off a lot of junk, so I don't have to wear goggles. On new wheels, they throw off a lot of cloth and fuzz, and it's a good idea to wear goggles. Okay, here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the guitar slowly. You're going to see it pick up gloss right there. Okay, you can see the shine beginning to develop. Maybe you can see the reflection of my hand in there. I moved over it slowly, but I'm going to have to go over it once or twice more. A lot of guitar makers will buff the flat surfaces with an automotive buffer, and I have an automotive buffer. I could use it, but I would have to probably build a jig for each shape of guitar I use, an automotive I make, and automotive buffers, because they use liquid materials, tend to be sloppy, to say the least. Now, I also want to point out, you notice I was buffing off of the edge, not onto the edge like this. This would tend to grab the guitar and fling it away. I've also avoided going anywhere near this top edge of the sound hole, although I will buff off of this edge of the sound hole while avoiding this top edge. Okay, here we go again. Now you'll notice also, as I was pushing harder, the wheel was slowing down. You could hear it slow down. I'm going to stop the wheel just so you can see how that happens with enough pressure. And then as I release, it comes back up to full speed again. this will kind of give you an idea why it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to fully buff a guitar. This top is almost ready for fine compound. I'm going to do a little fine compounding, and then the next time we come back we'll have most of the guitar done. I'll show you how I do some of the other areas like the fretboard.